Mellow greetings, viewers. It's another episode of Advanced Sci-Fi Civilisations Too Stupid to Really Exist. And this one will hopefully bring about those joy feelings. It's San Angeles, from Demolition Man. 1996 LA. Such a crime-ridden hellhole, it's surely on its way to becoming Mega City 1. But no, that punishment would be reserved for a few years later. For now, we'll just have to settle with being annoyed by Rob Schneider. In what is apparently not an audition for Judge Dredd, Stallone plays John Spartan, another one-man army masquerading as a law enforcement officer who was wrongly convicted of manslaughter after an inept coroner screwed him over big time. Frozen in a cryoprison with his villain BFF, they wake up 36 years later to discover that LA has gone full dystopia, though not in the way we've come to expect. Now a vast megalopolis stretching from San Diego to Santa Barbara, San Angeles is a brave new world. But this time the drug is political correctness. It's a militantly liberal Mega City 1. To be honest, it's probably not that far off what California would end up like if they actually managed to secede, minus the oppressive drug laws of course. So Snipes and Sly, our macho 90s action heroes, proceed to give San Angeles the shot of testosterone it sorely needs, assaulting this bunch of boring namby-pambies quite literally, but also with an impressive barrage of suitably dated one-liners.
You're gonna regret this the rest of your life.
Both seconds of it.
Though that's only in between bouts of shilling for Taco Bell, or if you're from my neck of the woods, Pizza Hut. Fittingly, it's the most draconian brand deal of all time, apparently wiping out all their competitors during something called the franchise wars. Taco Bell, or Pizza Hut, now enjoys a government-backed restaurant monopoly. And if that wasn't comprehensive enough, they're even being portrayed as a fine dining experience. Look, obviously I'm not one for maintaining my suspension of disbelief very well, if at all, but even I can see this is taking shit way too far. Though perhaps I should withhold judgment since Taco Bell has recently made it to my country and I live in the Western world's equivalent of Timbuktu. Well, assuming they put us on the map at all.
Rehab colony back in New Zealand doesn't seem so bad right now.
If Taco Bell made it here, their world dominance could well be assured. So it's about time someone explained to me how the damn 3 seashells work. I just can't see any way this is going down without making a horrific mess, and that's before I had a gutful of state-mandated tacos. I'll admit that using a wad of paper does seem a bit archaic, but have these guys ever heard of bidets? Though I suppose that would be far too risque for these wet flannels.
You really licked his ass.
Yep, prepare for this government to be all up in your business. In the totalitarian society of San Angeles, the disturbing lack of cuisine and toiletry options are probably the least of your concerns. Point 1. An intrusive, overbearing government invites rebellion. After a great earthquake, San Angeles was built from the ashes into its current form by this guy, Dr. Raymond Cocteau, a villain so profoundly stupid he could have definitely had his own episode of Villains Too Stupid to Win. So at the very least, he'll be getting his own section. It's not entirely clear what kind of central government this Cocteau is ruling over, but it sure seems like a paternalistic dictatorship, and he's been in power for a long time now. So if it's a democracy, it must be Russian. Funny, I would have thought a humane society would be against such an abusive power.
In a city which purports to have eliminated virtually all crime.
Cocteau rules over a nanny state turned ninny state. Fixated on reducing harm by micromanaging the population, they seek to tightly control all aspects of human behavior, which results in personal freedoms, choices, and even language being severely curtailed. They've basically cancelled everything fun and made taking risks illegal.
It is rare to encounter someone as dispassionate as we are.
Yeah, like RoboCop, Demolition Man is ripe with themes that are more relevant than ever. So it would probably be quicker for me to tell you what isn't illegal in San Angeles. Walking, breathing, existing. Because the list of banned activities is really quite extensive.
Smoking is not good for you, and has been deemed that anything not good for you is bad, hence illegal. Alcohol, caffeine, contact sports, meat, bad language, chocolate, gasoline, uneducational toys, and anything spicy. Abortion is also illegal, but then again, so is pregnancy if you don't have a license.
Salt is not good for you, hence it is illegal.
Salt, a substance which is essential to the human body, and considering everyone has also been forced into vegetarianism, which is a diet low in sodium, without added or table salt, monitoring your sodium levels must be a constant struggle. And it was bad enough only having a swanky vegetarian version of Taco Bell, now they won't even let us season this shit.
I swear to God, it's like food from a kindergarten.
Not an ounce of seasoning!
But perhaps most damning of all, these dastardly prudes have even banned sex. And this is just the stuff we're made aware of. Compliance with this intrusive behavioral code is monitored via an extensive Orwellian surveillance network of cameras and listening devices. There's seemingly very few places you can go in the city without being blasted for your potty mouth by these automated swear jars. Twice, and the cops are called.
I'd rather flee the f***ing country.
Graffiti will likely get you, and all cars notified. San Angeles population are encoded from birth, recording all of their transactions and allowing the authorities to track everyone in real time. They've even gone so far as to reprogram the minds of criminals. This oppressive regime has had a notable effect on the population, transforming them into a bunch of submissive, homogenized incels, crushed into a fine vanilla paste under the weight of an iron fist wearing a velvet glove. Dressing almost uniformly with stylistic influences from Japanese culture, Wacky Gaddafi and Dr. Moreau. That's not exactly great, though to be honest, their aversion to social touching doesn't seem quite so silly anymore. So it's not like everything in San Angeles is all that bad. The government has definitely achieved their goal of reducing harm to its lowest possible level, with violent crime, at least on the surface, ceasing to exist. They haven't had a murder in 16 years. But aside from that, their societal tinkering is kind of pointless and problematic, doing almost nothing in terms of the state maintaining order and coming at the expense of citizen morale. I'm sure we can understand the reasoning behind some of their harm minimization laws, but come on, no sex?
No kiss, no bang bang.
It's a natural biological function. Sexually repressing the entire population will definitely cause a range of psychological problems. It's just a recipe for disaster. Look, I'm not entirely against this VR sex thing either, but can't it be a supplement to sex rather than a replacement? Why don't we have both? They're discouraging the very act that will help their society maintain a viable population. I'd give them 40 years before San Angeles is just a few geriatric virgins shuffling around empty streets getting the early bird special at a now automated Taco Bell. So with nothing left to do but eat, work and sleep, it's not surprising that some people find it hard to be well in a situation that is morbidly depressing.
I don't know. Lately, I just don't feel like there's anything special about me.
You'd be tempted to kick off a revolution out of sheer boredom alone.
The risk of injury seems preferable to the certainty of dying from a chemical imbalance.
It is suggested there's a hidden subversive element in their society, at least when it comes to sex. Which brings a disturbing new possibility, with an admission of having sex getting you a visit from the fun police and perhaps a stint in cryo prison. I guarantee you this society is absolutely rife with untreated STDs. But San Angeles is plagued with problems that are somewhat more obvious. For a regime fixated on promoting wellness and uniformity, you'd think the society would be profoundly egalitarian, but you'd be wrong. San Angeles has a notable classist undercurrent, with an upper class of pretentious snobs and wannabe aristocrats and an expansive middle class all supporting the state order. But below this shiny sanitized world lies a far more filthy one. Deviants who refuse to sign up to Cocteau's agenda are forced to live a life in exile as Mad Max sewer rats, choosing a hard existence for the sake of having personal freedoms. The supposedly humane welfare state only interested in looking after their supporters, failing to supply these non-conformists with even basics such as food. Led by Dennis Leary playing himself, who despite being given the perfect vehicle for his anti-societal tirades ended up hating the movie. Now that's what I call staying in character.
What seems to be your boggle?
Though it's not quite as impressive as Jack Black playing another filthy crust punk.
That's a nice touch.
Apparently Sly wasn't the only one auditioning for a different movie. These desperate people represent a rather large existential threat to San Angeles. It's a rebellion movement that could kick off at any time, and although these scraps might struggle to contend with the likes of John Spartan, compared to the rest of the populace, these punks actually know how to fight, and they're heavily armed. The irony of the state's oppressive regime of control, it's likely the very thing that will lead to its downfall. But how exactly was this movement allowed to develop uncontested for so long? Well, the government does deserve some props for their lack of authoritarian enforcement, but concerningly, they're not really capable of enforcing their laws at all. Point 2. San Angeles is extremely vulnerable to collapse. Its citizens suffer from low resilience, and state enforcers are unprepared for even minor threats. Yep, San Angeles has failed in the absolute basics of statecraft. Their pacifist sensibilities leaving the state's enforcers unable to maintain a monopoly on violence. With a vast surveillance network at their disposal, yet unable to actually enforce their draconian laws. The San Angeles Police Department are like a far less intimidating version of the Thought Police. Unsure of how to pacify one man, they rely on a computer to guide them. The trouble is, it doesn't tell them how to actually apprehend anyone, at least not in time to stop them being pummeled. It's obvious the San Angeles Police Department has become overly reliant on their technology and the public's apparent willingness to submit to authority, but that's no excuse for their inadequate preparation. Modern soldiers and police are often training for situations that are entirely hypothetical. I'm left wondering what exactly these people do all day. Even without the threat of Phoenix or the scraps, at some point they're surely going to need to apprehend someone who is not of sound mind. They seem to be well aware that mentally ill people exist.
Maniac has responded with a scornful remark.
And it doesn't help that their equipment isn't up to task either. You'd think these guys would be rocking an impressive repertoire of non-lethal options. Tranq guns, taser guns, net guns, tranq taser net guns. But no, all they have is these woefully inadequate glow sticks which require close contact with the perp. Obviously for these guys, dealing with an armed defender is just not possible. Yet the few guns they have around aren't deactivated or even secured properly. They're just sitting behind highly smashable glass and replete with fully functional antique ammunition. So just one violent criminal completely overwhelms the SAPD, leaving Chief Himmler here little choice but to thaw out John Spartan to get the job done. And despite having reservations about the safety of such an endeavor,
I'm not sure he's any different than Simon Phoenix himself.
He's talking smack to Spartan the moment he wakes up.
Caveman, let's finish with all the Rip Van Winkle and get moving.
But a lot of these pretentious jerks seem to resort to crass name-calling when challenged.
What would you say if I called you a brutish fossil, symbolic of a decayed era, gratefully forgotten?
You're a first-class cunt.
I guess their verbal code doesn't extend to being polite. And don't get me started on the hypocrisy of their horrendous music tastes.
Oh wow, this is my fave.
What, so unhealthy food advertisements are allowed now? Fat kids? Sissy kids? I'm almost offended. There are no tough or fat kids left, thanks to you absolute monsters. Chief Arsehole now stands in Spartan's way at every opportunity, eventually threatening to throw him back in the freezer. But we all know they couldn't do that, even if they wanted to. It's not long until their lack of basic investigative skills are also laid bare.
We can just wait for another code to go red. And when Phoenix performs another murder-death-kill, we'll know exactly where to pounce.
If it weren't for Spartan and Huxley, they wouldn't have been able to track Simon at all.
He's on Sunset Boulevard looking for a fucking bus.
So with a complacent, submissive public and an inadequate police force, it's safe to say San Angeles is vulnerable to societal collapse with any unexpected event. It's not clear what's happening in the rest of the United States or the larger world, but I'm surprised this place hasn't been steamrolled already, though its demise may come sooner rather than later, considering their entire civilization is heavily reliant on their bumbling dictator. Point 3. Cocteau dooms the way of life he created, proving himself to be one of the most overconfident, short-sighted villains of all time. the architect and head micromanager of San Angeles, and the apparent owner of a state-controlled monopoly. So in other words, everything is indisputably this guy's fault. Living up to his dickish name, Cocteau is a pompous control freak, projecting his raging OCD onto an entire civilization.
Indeed. I have found that most humans are less than meticulous when it comes to their domestic habits.
Posing as a pope-like father figure, in reality he's more a pope-like big brother. He already knows the scraps pose an existential threat to their society.
Your job is to kill Mr. Edgar Friendly and stop a revolution before it precipitates.
And he knows the police force aren't up to task. But rather than providing welfare for the scraps or fixing the actual problems with his enforcers, both of which would require an admission that San Angeles is less than perfect, he instead decides to assassinate scrap leader Edgar Friendly, believing this will stop the threat of rebellion for good, and supposedly paving the way for a more perfect version of his false utopia.
I'll have carte blanche to create the perfect society. San Angeles will be a beacon of order, with the purity of an ant colony.
Is Cocteau Borg?
I would have to say yes.
Yeah, on top of all of his other neuroses, this supposed pacifist is also a hypocrite of the highest order. And I'm 100% certain Monster Cocteau is having regular fluid transfers with his geisha girl here.
Let's go blow this guy.
Did I mention he appears to have sadistic tendencies?
People are terrified of you.
What's new? People have always been terrified of me.
Yes, but this time they're really intimidated.
His oppression of society, perhaps intentional, serving as the ultimate source material for his disturbing wank bank. Is this what he calls being well?
Well, I must say that whacking, whatever it is, sounds most disagreeable.
Despite the sicko poring over the minutiae of his society, his big plan for dealing with the scraps is riddled with oversights, putting his life at extreme risk and possibly handing San Angeles to the forces of utter chaos. For a start, killing Edgar will obviously not get rid of the threat of rebellion, since the scraps and the underlying issues that cause their movement would still exist.
People are hungry. We got nothing left to lose.
At best, it's a half measure that might buy Cocteau a little time. At worst, it will probably cause the very uprising he so fears, because Edgar Friendly is currently keeping the scraps on a leash and making sure their bellies are full.
They do not appear to be posing a threat to us at this time.
He seemingly has no interest in sparking a revolution.
I'm no leader. I do what I have to do. Sometimes people come with me.
For all we know, Friendly will become a martyr upon his death, potentially inspiring the desperate scraps to unleash themselves on San Angeles. But as bad as the basic premise of Cocteau's plan is, the specifics are far, far worse. Cocteau covertly reprograms Simon Phoenix, turning this master criminal into a supervillain, loading this unpredictable, vicious killer with absolutely everything he needs to escape from prison, kill Edgar Friendly, and overthrow Cocteau's government. And he seemingly doesn't have a plan to get rid of Simon once the dirty deed is done. But don't worry, Cocteau in his eternal wisdom has made Phoenix physically incapable of killing him while still allowing him the intention. A foolproof failsafe, I'm sure. Personally, I'd just lock him in a room somewhere and leave him to die of thirst. So after Simon heads out and starts raising hell, Cocteau makes the mistake of telling Chief Arsehole to do everything in his power to stop Simon, which directly leads to John Spartan's release. Apparently hands off when it comes to his cryo prison, yet failing to keep his distance when it comes to his sordid little conspiracy, rushing to the museum all hot and boggled by the disruption caused by Simon.
Our noble facility has been desecrated by hooligans.
Shouldn't you have been expecting something like this?
What's the matter with that jerk?
He then outs himself to Phoenix as the puppet master, and in the process places a massive target on his back. Now learning of Spartan's presence, rather than throwing him back in the freezer, well within his power, he seems to view the Demolition Man as an insurance policy against Simon.
Look, you finish your business, and I'll stuff him back in the freezer. Think of him as a guarantee.
In other words, he's happy for someone to be working against his own agenda. What?
Why didn't you just shove a leash up my ass?
Predictably, Simon has been programmed with all the skills to break into Cocteau's avant-garde lair. He even plops himself down on the dude's throne, now channeling his inner Mad Max dictator. Could he make his intentions any more obvious? His horde of museum guns was probably already enough to seize San Angeles, but yeah, okay, let's give him some troops.
I'll need about 5 or 6 more special men.
Fine. Take care of it.
Delegating this task to Bob without for 1 second considering they might also need mental safeguards.
So you're going to be the only mad dog killer type, right?
Exactamundo.
Trusting this admitted mad dog killer on his word that these grunts will be more civil. Maybe check their criminal records. I'd forgive the younger dupes of San Angeles for this level of naivety, but Cocteau has no excuse. This guy lived through challenging times. His obvious overconfidence causing him to underestimate his opponents. In John's case, Cocteau does the bare minimum in terms of covering his tracks. He fails to delete the museum footage of his interaction with Phoenix and leaves his secret cryo-programming files unsecured, easily overridden by a police officer's one-button authorization. I mean, who is this information meant to be hidden from? Taco Bell employees?
In any covert battle, logic is a potent weapon. You might try it sometime.
However, at this point, it would probably be safer for Cocteau to just let Spartan take him into custody. Yep, we made it. It's the moment that cements Cocteau as one of the most astonishingly short-sighted villains of all time.
Will you please kill him? It's pissing me off.
Unceremoniously executed and thrown like the dry ideologue he is onto the dumpster fire of history. The way of life he created seemingly dying with him.
Why don't you get a little dirty? You will like clean. And somewhere in the middle, I don't know, you'll figure it out.
I guess that's the trouble with creating a society whose citizens have the resilience of lost little children.
What we do? How will we live?
Though considering Demolition Man 2 is apparently on the cards. His legacy may survive in some fashion. There's bound to be more than a few Cocteau stains on the kimono of San Angeles. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to find out how the 3 seashells work, and if you can be boggled, be well this video with a like.